Okay, I'm going to open this now to members of the public. If you have any questions, please approach the mic. And again, please come up to the mic, identify yourself. Tell us whether you have been previously represented
Has nothing to do with this
office.
Nothing to do with this.
And I'll now take a line down the middle aisle. So, now we're only asking, again, this is only questions, and this is only questions of this witness and his testimony. Traffic and parking, sir. Hi.
Hi,
What's your name, please?
I'm Richard Kirtley,
Spell your last name, please.
Kirtley. I'm a resident on Oakdene Avenue, about 200 feet from the front door of the school.
You previously represented by this party.
I was previously represented. So, I'm trying to put these in some sort of order. I have a question regarding the study that was done of the Rhoda Center and the Hackensack YMCA.
Yes.
Was there only like one particular day and two particular times of that day? Because
Yes, according to the ITE, I chose the peak time of a community center, and that's when it was studied for those facilities.
okay. The Hackensack YMCA, how many single-family residences are immediately adjacent to that facility?
I don't know that number off.
I do. There are none. It's in a commercial area. Let's see. So regarding, is it okay if I approach the?
Sure.
So regarding basically the entrance coming in off.
Can anybody in the audience see this?
Yeah, that's right.
So anyway, regarding the drop-off in the morning, coming in off of Oakdene Avenue, and given the proximity of the entrance to this corner here. Now, this part of Oakdene Avenue, right in front of the school, is all one way going east. West of that area, it's a two-way street.
If he's going to be testifying.
I'm building up to my question. This is a two-way street, and there's parking on both sides, so it's restricted.
I have to object because he's testifying.
Ask, you're trying to put facts on the record. Ask him, is this one-way, two-way? Okay. If you want to get that information, we can't.
Is this a one-way or two-way street?
It's two-way.
Okay. And is there parking on both sides of that street?
Yes.
When two cars are approaching each other on that part of the street, and there's currently parking on each side, are they able to pass one another?
It is tight, or they would have to slow down and let the other vehicle pass it.
Well, having lived there, you have to pull over and let
I
the other
object.
vehicle
He
pass.
answered the question. He answered the question that was there.
And you'll be given a chance to tell the board what you want to testify to, but not yet.
Okay, all right.
It's a skill.
I have one other.
Okay, good at.
So what is to prevent the parents from pulling up in front of the school and dropping their kids off and just running into the kid, as opposed to following the rules and going in through Oakdene?
Nothing is preventing them from doing it, but they will be instructed the proper procedure.
And is that the purpose really of this, is to make sure we're dropping off on site and not having people drop off
That is
on
the
the
purpose.
street?
That is the purpose of this traffic control.
How will that be enforced?
Well, if it was on the street, I would assume the Teaneck police would have jurisdiction.
It would be enforced by the aides out there.
There's no parking. Correct. Parking, you're allowed to park on the street, you're allowed to park on the street.
Right.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's,
I'd like to just ask a question before we, how many, there's a little confusion among some of the members on the board. How many total students between daycare and Board of Ed do you anticipate on a daily basis?
it's licensed for 107. That's the max. Okay, so conceivably,
107.
but, you know, some are gonna be in the morning, some might be, you know, some might be in the afternoon, some, yeah, it's, but the maximum number is licensed for most of these.
Couldn't hear the answer.
Yeah, please.
Maximum number of children is 107.
Thank you.
Sir?
My name is Jesse Barton, that's Jesse Barton. I live on Oakdene Ave.
Were you previously represented by this place?
I was previously represented, but not now.
Okay, that's your question, sir.
Yes, when we first started up, you were throwing some numbers around, there was a lot of noise back there, and I just want to clarify some numbers. Did you say 185 increase in traffic through the area during the course of the day? Well, you mentioned 185, and what was that reference to?
The proposed trips anticipated in the PM peak hour is 180 trips, which is 90 vehicles in and 90 vehicles out.
Okay, and so 90 and 90 out. So you're changing the entrance to enter on Oakdene Avenue
Yeah.
because, and exit on Hillside.
Ideally, we want to keep them away from the high volume Teaneck roads.
Right, and you said something about either the current status or the status will be, and I'm trying to ask this question about this, that there was 11 left-hand turns off of Oakdene Avenue, and there was 8 right-hand turns, or no, 8 and 11 at different times of the day.
Correct. We're increasing the amount of left turns, we estimate by 5 additional left turns in the AM and 11 in the PM.
Right, and how many are there right now before you add on to this?
I would have to research, I would have to look
Just a
at my...
ballpark.
There's not that many, I would say there was only 20.
Okay.
I would have to look at mine.
So therefore, this quiet neighborhood street, you know, where people go and everything, you're going to then throw all this extra traffic running down Oakdene Avenue, like for example, we haven't heard much talk about the swim team practices. We've been hearing a lot about the swim team needs, but the swim team practices will be a daily thing going on. So I know we're all teenagers at once. You can imagine all the teens will possibly be driving down, making teen noises, loud noises from the car, and essentially disturbing the neighborhood on the way through. Is that accurate? No, that's my question. There'll be an increase of traffic, including teens and noise-making cars.
I would say that the swim team members during practice, they will carpool, and it's only 3 months out of the year. Yes.
Just Mr. Martin, to be clear.
Yes.
The traffic report says 83 in a peak hour, 97 out. So it's 180 total, but just, the witness indicated 90.
So I'm correct to think that the traffic on Oakdene and Hillside is going to increase by a significant amount. Is that accurate?
I can't answer that.
Is that accurate?
It would, but
Like by a multiple of how many times?
it has the capacity to handle that increase.
So a dirt road has capacity, but does it, so it's going, by how many times will it be increasing the traffic on our street, our quiet street?
From when? From now,
Just
from the
period.
property?
And
Can I talk? From the point that the building is vacant? Is that the comparison you're talking about?
I'm talking about the people who live on the street 24/7. Yes. So what time during, at any time? What will be the increase?
The comparison you're trying to make.
24/7, the people who live
Sir, the way that traffic engineers calculate traffic impacts is they say, what is the time of the day where there's the most cars coming from the site, right? And I think that the witness testified that there'll be a certain number of cars coming onto Oakdene during that hour. There may be cars at other times, but the most cars at a given hour is the peak hour, and that's what the testimony was.
Okay, so we don't know really how much it's going to increase the traffic on this quiet, beautiful street.
We absolutely do. We have testimony and we have a...
I think that the witness, Mr. Martin is asking, what's the total number of cars per day coming onto
This quiet, beautiful street, okay.
I only analyze the peak hours.
But it is calculable. It is.
It is. Well, I hope we'll calculate it when we're making our decisions.
I've actually got a question.
Yes, okay.
So He's not testifying now. I mean, I guess we could ask him questions if we want to swear him in, but.
Yeah, no, that's good enough. Thanks.
No, not 3 minutes.
Good news.
Good evening, how are you?
Yes,
My name is Kevin Barksdale, I live 84 Oakdene Avenue, Barksdale.
Were you previously represented by Ms. Price?
Yes, I was. And I have a couple of questions for the witness. I have a lot of questions, actually. One of the questions I have to ask you is, are you familiar with the bus, which, the express bus, which goes into New York City? Are you familiar with that bus?
From Teaneck
Yes.
Road?
From
I'm
Teaneck
familiar
Road.
of it, yes.
Do you know what number it is?
Not off the top of my head.
It's the 167 bus. I know it because I used to take it all the time. Are you familiar with the last stop that in Teaneck before the bus go into the city?
No.
The last stop is on Oakdene Avenue. The reason why I'm asking that question is because all of the commuters who have to go into during peak hours, they park along Oakdene Avenue, Hillside, and Morningside Drive so that they can take the last stop before the bus goes and gets expressed into New York City. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Sure.
Because they want at less, the least amount of time on the bus. Now, you mentioned that, okay, with off-side parking, that there's going to be enough space for the parents to drop their kids off if the queue is full and then going into the area. I don't think that's possible.
I'm not sure that's
You-
the testimony.
you don't-
That's a question.
You don't believe there's enough on-site parking?
No, I'm talking about off-side parking.
Oh, on-street parking?
Yes, on the street parking, yes.
Is there any off-street parking being proposed for childcare drop-off?
Yeah, I did not investigate the on-street parking because I believe this facility has an adequate amount of on-site parking. I did observe the on-street parking. From what I observed, there were availability on those roads.
Okay, another one of the things I saw that you said that the delay from Oakdene Avenue to Teaneck Road was 6 seconds in the morning. Am I correct?
An increase.
An increase of 6 seconds in the morning.
Yeah.
That's making a right-hand turn going south, am I correct?
No, that's the approach increase in delay overall.
Oh, okay, so when a person is making a left turn going north, is that a 6-second increase?
Yes,
And then when a person making a right turn going south, that's also a 6-second increase.
I wouldn't say that the right turn wouldn't, it's a combined really. I would say, if I had to say there's an increase, maybe a second for the right-hand turn and 5 for the left-hand turn, something like that. It's a combination of the approach.
So then at rush hour, when everybody's rushing to DeGraw Avenue, which is the next street from Hillside, and then DeGraw Avenue leads to 95, which leads into the city, everyone is rushing to that light. You say that it's only going to take 1 second as far as the additional traffic to make a right-hand turn?
Correct.
And then you say that it's only going to take 6 seconds to make a left-hand turn going north?
For my analysis, yes.
Oh, okay, because that's quite something different than what I observed other people have. In fact, actually what I observed, but that's a comment.
Can you give us the turn times or the wait times for intersections? There may be a misconception as to what your testimony is. It's not actually 6 seconds.
No, it's an increase in 6
So
seconds.
why don't you tell us what it is under the build, under the existing, the no build, and the build? Because I think those are the numbers that are important.
Yes.
We're on page 8 of your report.
Yes. For the eastbound approach on Oakdene Avenue, right now there is a current delay of 57.3 seconds.
57 seconds.
Yes, if you build up the traffic in the area, which is, in this area, it's a 1% increase in traffic over a year, that delay goes to 58.1.
Okay.
And then adding the site-generated traffic, the delay is 64.3 seconds.
So could you just to clarify for the witness, the no build, what that means is that if this site is not developed, it takes 57.3 seconds, next year will increase to 58.1?
Theoretically.
Theoretically. That's what DOT estimates.
Correct.
And that's south, what about north?
No, that's eastbound.
Oh,
That's the eastbound approach. That's the problematic approach to
okay,
that.
eastbound approach. Okay, so that's the eastbound approach going south. Am I
Making,
correct?
making a right turn.
Making a right turn, yes.
The overall level of service increased by 6.2 seconds in the AM peak hour. That's the overall approach level of service. And like I said,
That
that,
difference between between going north or south,
yeah, I believe
they combine?
they are combined. So I believe out of those 6.2 seconds, the majority would be an increased delay for the left hand, the left turn.
Okay, so the left hand, at the maximum, you say the left hand will be a minute, perhaps, right?
Currently, it is a minute, but it'll be a little over a minute, yeah.
Okay, the Hackensack Y survey, you did that in July, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'm a member of the Hackensack Y, and you said that the parking lot has a capacity, with 97% capacity?
Yeah, it was, the existing lot has 79 current spaces, and at the time of the count, we counted 76 spaces.
Okay.
In the PM. In the PM.
Okay, but the reason why I'm asking that is because I'm also a member of the Oakdene Swim Club with myself and a lot of other people. And what happens is during during July, August,
I'm
September.
going to Jeff.
Okay, okay, Jackson, okay, I understand. So then, do you think that it's possible that people use the Hackensack Y less in July because they might be going to outdoor swimming clubs, like the Teaneck swim or the Oakdene swim club or the multi-park swim club?
It's possible. The point of the counts was just to get a gauge of how many spaces were occupied.
So the
But
count
it's possible.
can't be skewed because the fact that there are less people going indoor swimming during July in comparison to going outdoor swimming during the summer. Am I correct?
It's possible.
Is it possible? Okay, great. There's a couple other things I might ask. The daycare, you mentioned that there's a daycare and a preschool. From what I gather, the daycare is from 6 months to 3 years. Is that correct?
The ages, or,
The ages.
I believe so.
Okay, and preschool is 4 and 5 years old. Am I correct?
4 years.
4 years and 5 years?
5 years is kindergarten.
Well, it might be some people before they go into kindergarten, they still have to do preschool if they have a.
3 to 5 years.
Okay, 3 to 5 is preschool, daycare is 6 months on, or maybe even 2 months. Okay, so with the parents who have daycare with the infant, would they need more time to take their child into the classroom
But
than?
if it's 3 years old to 5 years old.
Okay, so they're not doing daycare underneath 3 years old?
Childcare, 3 years old.
Okay, yes, okay. Okay, let me see. 38 residents. Okay, another question I asked, I have is about the swim meet after school. You said that swim meet is usually between the hours of 3 and 5, am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, one of the things you said when the swim meet is the fact that the buses would drop off the kids, and then the bus would go upon its merry way, and then come back and pick up the kids.
Could be, yes. A
Okay.
possible scenario.
That's the scenario. Okay, because my son used to play basketball and went to a lot of meets. Usually what I think is and maybe you could correct me, don't the bus stay and wait until the meet is over to pick up the kids?
That isn't another alternative that they can do.
But isn't that the usual alternative, because the bus company is from some other place, and then the bus usually have to just have the bus driver wait until the kids are finished and then leave?
From what I've studied, that the bus does stay,
The bus does stay.
but we can make it a condition that the bus leaves during. But we do have provided loading zones that the bus can.
You're gonna make it a condition that the bus leave, where will the bus go?
It would be worked out with the.
That's for the bus company to figure out.
That's what the bus company will figure out. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, another thing is the fact that, so then the swim meet is between 3 to 5, and that would be the max pickup time for the parents as far as picking up their kids right during the swim meet. Am I correct?
The max pickup?
Well, I mean, the parents pick up from daycare would be, I guess, after work, and that would be between hours, maybe 5 to 7.
Pickup is
something like that.
really spread out.
The full day, the testimony was the full day daycare ends at 2:30. Which would
Okay.
be prior to any swim meet.
You know what, I saw something online where it said daycare from 7 to 7.
Well, I'm saying the full day. If you drop them off in the morning, 2:30 is the pickup. You can obviously have aftercare if your child wants to stay later.
Oh, okay, because there's most parents, like if they do have daycare, they have it because they're working and then they will come perhaps after care.
Correct, if they work the full day, if they first work the full day, maybe 5 o'clock. If they work at night, maybe not.
So it's 7 to 7, so that's right during the middle of the swimming.
I'm just telling you the testimony was the full day ends at 2:30.
Okay,
The testimony of the traffic, correct. They'll have an aftercare program available for people, kids that stay there later. And the testimony of the traffic engineer is that the pickup is staggered.
Well, I guess that's the end of my questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have the mic.
It's just easier to bring in the mic. Now I gotta turn around.
You had said something,
Oh, you want, okay.
what street had a level of service F?
The eastbound approach of Oakdene Avenue onto Teaneck Road.
F is the worst.
It is.
With these additional trips, I know you were talking about, 6 seconds, how does that change the designation of the other streets? F is not gonna get any worse, but what about the other streets?
It won't affect the level services of the other streets.
And that's in the report, correct?
Yeah.
Nothing else?
Assume this is on. I'm sorry. I'm Patty Barksdale, 84 Oakdene Avenue.
And, were you previously represented?
Yes, I was.
Okay, thank you.
I'm really asking some questions just to try to get an understanding of the number of children that will be in the place. I know you said there's a maximum of 107. That's determined by the size of the building, is that like the state has determined that you can only have a maximum of 107 kids?
Correct, it's the license from the state, it's licensed for 107 maximum.
Okay, and of that, right now, how many are from Teaneck?
12.
40? Is that right?
Right now, I believe there's only approximately 36 kids in the program,
Okay,
because the building is obviously not fully, the project is not completed.
okay, and from that 36 that is currently in the building, how many are in Teaneck?
Dr. Irving testified that they were contracted to have 60.
But that was before the Eugene Field got renovated, right? So I'm just trying to determine if we have a maximum, maybe 107 kids. I'm just trying to estimate how many actually would come from Teaneck, and then where would the other children come from? Because that's what it has an impact of you saying whether they would jump on the bus with their children to take them or
Sure.
walk. So and then on top of that, I know that AUCC has been advertising, right?
Well, can I start with that first question, ma'am, just so I don't lose it?
I'm going.
This isn't really the right witness to.
I know,
now.
I don't know, that's,
I mean, I can get the answer from,
because it sort
my
of leads
client.
into traffic though. That's the only reason why I'm trying to get a feel for how many kids are actually, how they come. So I know he's not the, I know you're not the expert at
Don't know
daycare.
that, no.
So currently, I'm
Hold
told
on,
my client.
we need to reflect that as well, right? It's ultimately acting. Okay, good.
So currently, 18 of the children, according to my client, are from the Board of Ed. Another 5 are from 15 residents, but they're private. Sure. So 18 of them are from the Board of Ed, and 5 of them are private residents of Teaneck. They're not coming from the Board of Ed. At the beginning, if you remember, the first hearing we had back in August, Dr. Irving testified that the goal was to have 60 kids from the Board of Ed going to the daycare. Because this, obviously, we had the process with the application, the school year started, so the numbers here are lower. We're hoping for next year, we'll be in a position to fully accommodate all those Teaneck Board of Ed kids, as well as some private citizens.
Because that was the second part I was going to ask you, because since I know it had to be reduced, and then Teaneck is opening up in Eugene Field to take some of these children as well, what is your anticipation for spring of 2020? Do you really think that you're going to get a slew of kids from Teaneck that then would eat up you needing to market outside of Teaneck for kids? I'm just trying to figure out the traffic flow again.
Sure. We are anticipating a large majority coming from the Board of Education, and most of the kids coming from Teaneck or the surrounding town.
So when would you have that determination? Because once again, I think it goes right back into how the traffic flow is going to go. And they have to sign a contract or an agreement with you.
Correct.
I have to ask, I allow
I know.
you some leeway. I really must insist that your questions be of this witness. Your questions are good questions, but right now we have this witness testifying. And you can frame your questions for this witness or ask questions of the witness.
And then just so I understand, and it's difficult because as you know, we don't have the lawyer now, so I know it will be streamlined. But for me, I thought these questions sort of flow into his determination about how much traffic will be coming into the building.
Well, that's why I said, if your question relates to the traffic and the parking, and they're valuable, legitimate questions, but I'm not sensing that the questions are about traffic. That's my concern.
Right now, all the traffic generated by site is, everyone's coming by vehicle. I didn't have to do a reduction for bus use or anything, so it's a conservative analysis.
The other question I had is regarding, and so this may be difficult to ask too, because it's regarding the use of the pool. Right now, the swim team is in your calculation of the use of the pool, right? In terms of saying that they were bused in for the tournaments, et cetera.
Correct.
And that's really where some of the volume comes from. Is there, and I don't know how to do this either, because is there a possibility that in order to maximize the use of the pool, that we will go after other swim teams outside of Teaneck in order for, or is it just Teaneck will be the only swim team that will be utilizing?
As far as I'm aware of.
Yeah, the testimony has been that the Teaneck High School swim team, girls and boys, will be the only ones having practice there and having their home meets there.
And when you did the traffic study and you took a look at the Hackensack area as well as Teaneck, I don't know if it was asked earlier, did you take in consideration the off-site parking? Because in Hackensack, a lot of times people will park not just in the lots, they park in the street, they park in the fruit and vegetable place, they park other places. And that's maybe some of the reasons why, the spacing, so I wasn't sure.
I observed the amount of cars parked there, and while I was observing, I didn't see many people walking into the facility from an off-site parking, but there probably is some, yes.
And I would think the same with the Rota Center, that people don't specifically only park here, they may park street as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
What's your name?
Hi. My name is Rosa Tumitamba, T as in Tom, UMIPAMBA.
Were you previously represented by Ms. Price?
I was.
Thank you.
You need my address?
It's up to you.
Oakdene Ave. Okay. So I think some questions were asked, but just trying to get an idea of where you show where the cars are going to line up, but where exactly is going to be the drop-off point? Where is the attendant going to be?
I would say that fluctuates depending on how many cars are entering. If they see more cars entering, it will be further down to increase the queue length, so that fluctuates.
But I mean, are the kids being taken into the front door? Yeah, are they going up the ramp? Where is the lineup exactly?
I would say ideally they would be dropped off by the crosswalk, walked over by the parents and taken by the aide on the sidewalk or right outside the vehicle on the crosswalk, and they can enter the daycare center either via the ramp or the front door.
What's the official entrance?
It has two. It has a handicap entrance and it has a front entrance, both facing Oakdene, for the child.
Okay, what's the closest entrance for attendance, since if they're gonna be dropped off, right, and the child's gonna be walked, there's gonna be one attendant, and he or she's gonna walk towards where? How long is that going to take? Is there going to be a second attendant waiting in the wings for the next child to be walked?
Yeah, I would say there would be multiple aides there.
Yeah, the testimony previously was 3 to 4 outside at each station. So some aide will help take the children out of the car, walk them over to either the ramp or the front door, or another aide would take them then into the building.
The idea is to always have an attendant there waiting.
Outside.
Okay.
And if it was raining, they would probably be under the busy.
Okay, so that if it's raining, they're more likely to go up the front of the school. If it's snow, they're gonna go up the front of the school. So more than likely, correct me if I'm wrong, the assumption would be that they would line up before the crosswalk as opposed to all the way down where you show 3 more cars.
Ideally, because the walk is shorter, but
Right, in the winter.
if they see a lot of cars coming in, though, we want to keep them off of those.
We understand that, but if there are blocking the kids, are you gonna have a separate directing of the traffic? Or is the same attendants also waving people in while walking your child to the door?
I would say if we had 3 or 4 attendants, one could be in charge of traffic.
Again, back to the weather issues. If someone's all the way parked at the front, and they're going to be pushed to line up a little bit further in, you may or may not get 6 cars like you have them, because they're bumper to bumper. No one really parks that close to each other. So the possibility would be that there would be 3 cars, maybe 4 inside. They can't block the sidewalk, so they would not be on the sidewalk
Across the crosswalk.
at the very top where Oakdene.
Oh, yeah.
So they can't, block that sidewalk, they're assuming, but we don't know because no one's there.
I just had to ask a question.
Okay, sorry.
No,
I digress.
sorry.
Okay, so, I asked you about the attendant, about second attendant. So how long will it take to check the child in the school before they come to retrieve the next child? Because that goes into the queue, and how long people are gonna sit on that queue in order to get, through, and how many cars then begin to line up. So what's the assumption of the time frame? Right?
Well,
Is
probably-
there biometrics that's gonna happen? Does someone have to?
Well, let's allow him to not.
Okay, sorry.
If you don't know, don't say
So
you don't know.
I think that the witness is not going to be testifying about operational security for the school. He can testify about how long the pickup drop-off time is, if he knows. But
I would say it would vary. It would be an estimation on my part, but I would say 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, tops, depending on the child.
So this hasn't been tested out, we haven't tested this out, right?
Yeah, we tried to optimize how many the queues and get them off of Oakdene Ave. Yeah.
Okay,
And
so someone timed it? How
It
long?
hasn't been timed yet.
Okay, so it's just an assumption then.
Yes.
So I think you already answered the average age range of the child, right, 3 to 5?
Right.
So there are not going to be any child that needs to be carried in, young kids that cannot walk by
I'm
themselves?
not
Not
sure
to my
I'm
knowledge.
not sure it's a question, but it's.
Okay, that's for him.
Just, witness.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just going through the ones that have mentioned that there are parking spots, well, in the drawing that we got, parking spots that were for the employees were labeled, and those were the ones closest to the back of the building. Are
Yeah.
those still the employee parking spots?
Yes, we have 11 tandem spots for employees.
Okay. But, so those, are those the only parking spots for the employees?
Right now, but there was talk before of making
3?
3 additional employees.
So back to the parking spots in the back of the building. You mentioned they're tandem with non-employee parking spots. And when I...
Non-employee? All the tandem ones are for employees.
So they're actually, what, 22 then?
Correct. 11 tandem spots for a total.
Okay, so 22 parking spots, and those are all going to be labeled so that people can't park there.
Correct.
Okay. And that leaves, what, about 80 parking spots, less than 80 for the public?
Correct.
Okay. Because you were mentioning that the 100 calculation, is that solely for the people attending the school?
Employees are all accounted for in that parking generation.
Okay.
So yes.
So, back to that same tandem. Are the people that are going to be parking in the back, and the closest to the building, are they going to be required, the people that park behind them, are they going to be required to hand their keys over to someone, since obviously if there's an emergency, a fire, how do people get out?
Man, it's not a question for a traffic engineer.
Oh, okay.
He can only testify to what he knows. That would be a question for the people running the school. That would be
Okay, so we'll have an opportunity to ask that.
We were here in August, and it was opened up to questions of the public at that time. But to
Okay,
answer your question, there was testimony that they're going to be assigned to employees, so the employees will know which spots belong to who.
okay, and they'll be able to get out in case of fire.
So they'll know who's
They'll
going.
have to wait for the other person to come out first.
If, in the event of a fire, you're probably not gonna have the employees driving away.
No.
It's a daycare.
Right.
I'm hoping not.
Okay, right. All right.
Mr. Barnett, the alarm will be to break at 9.
That's Mr. Barber.
These are probably,
Same haircut, I am right.
I have one here.
Oh,
so, I'm sorry, okay, back to the parking. We mentioned that, who would be enforcing if there is parking in front of the building or blocking the sidewalk. How is that going to be handled? Is it up to the neighbors to report that people are parking and then we have to get the police involved? Or how is that?
On-street parking on the
On the
street?
front, but obviously in the morning, they can't park in the front of the building.
Yeah, if they're illegally parked, I would say it's up to the police to take them.
Okay, so it's up to
The applicant is going to tell them, don't do that. The whole purpose of this plan is to make drop-off on the site, which I mentioned historically, they probably happen mostly on the street. So we're trying to take all that activity and put it on the site. So we limit how many people are actually parking on the site.
So in order to kind of enforce the fact that the cars are coming in from Oakdene and going out Hillside, wouldn't it just be easier to take out the exit out into Oakdene? That would prevent people from coming out that way and someone forgets to put a cone?
It's a possibility we could lose that driveway. I don't think it's necessary.
Or
For safety
does it make
reasons.
site circulation easier to lose that?
No, it doesn't. It actually complicates site circulation because people can't exit that way during non-peak hours when this isn't in place. They would have to circle around, so it complicates site circulation.
Okay. I don't know if I can ask this, but,
Well,
She doesn't know if she can answer the question she wants to answer.
yeah,
Try it.
because obviously I'm a resident of the street, and I know that from experience, people that, especially now that the exit is being located closer to Teaneck on Hillside, It's already happened before, but there would be a tendency for cars to come out from hillside and turn down towards.
Yeah, I think you're actually giving us testimony now.
Oh, I am, okay.
There'll be a time you could do that
Oh, that's
at the end of the
fine.
meeting, but right now we can find ourselves a question.
Oh, okay, all right, I think, I see my questions, hold on. Sorry, in the winter, due to the snow and ice, what's the average drop off? Because obviously that's gonna be a little bit different than summer, when it's nice.
The average drop-off time, during icy conditions, I would say it would be a little bit longer, but I don't have an exact number.
When we get the exact number.
I don't know if there's data for that specifically, but
Yeah, again,
Do you think it'll be a
just to find out.
substantial difference?
I don't
Just
think
to
it'll
find
be,
out
I don't-
how many cars are gonna queue up when it's snow versus when it's nice.
I don't think it'll be a substantial difference, but.
Okay, I think you already answered this one. Okay, if there is a child being walked to school, is there going to be a crossing guard at each major crossing, since this is now a school again? That,
It's not a question for you.
that's not a question for him? Okay. Who is that a
There's
question?
no crossing guard.
That would probably be a Board of Education police issue.
So they'll have to figure that out.
Well, they can answer the question, but the applicant is not in control of that operation.
Okay. All right, I think I already asked the question, but, just about the cars not blocking the sidewalk and how it's gonna be enforced.
I don't foresee a backup blocking the sidewalk at all. I don't believe that will happen. But as far as being enforced, that's why the aides are out there, and one specifically for traffic control to move cars up to get off of the sidewalk and off of Oakdene Ave.
And they'll be, the people who come here, the daycare or the childcare will be given procedures. So we hand it out so they'll know ahead of time. This is what you're supposed to be doing, what you're not supposed to be doing. Don't park on Oakdene and drop off your kids in that location, bring them on.
And I would say if it's backed up a little bit, people can make that assessment and then turn into the parking lot on this side, park their cars and walk their
I
children.
guess the reason I'm asking is obviously it was a public school and, the school was beholden to the laws. This is now a private entity, a business that is utilizing this property, and we're trying to make sure that is followed.
Absolutely, you're subject to the laws just like you do.
Did we ask about Title 39 last week?
We did.
Yes. So the applicant agreed as a condition of approval that they would allow the Teaneck Police Department to enforce the traffic laws on site just as they would on a street. So you can't park in a fire lane, if you park in a handicap space, that's a problem, things like that. And that's how you deal with the on-site issues.
All right, thank you.
Okay, folks, I have to ask now that we're going to adjourn for about 10 minutes, or recess, I should say, for no more than 10 minutes. We're going to reconvene at 9:10. Those of you who are online, please remember where you are and protect your place. So no one takes it, and we will pick up again at 9:10.
Did they say how long this was going to last? Did you say?
We said 10.
I thought.
Around.
I hope so. 3 hours is enough for me.
D is in David, E, caps the V is in Victor, R-I-E-S.
Please speak in the microphone.
107 Hillside Avenue in Teaneck, and yes, I once was and no longer am.
I believe the answer was, he was once represented by Ms. Price and no longer. Thank you.
Well, a lot of the questions you've answered. The drop-off time to get, that was an estimate.
Yes.
The 2 minutes. Considering all the things that everyone's brought up about that, including things like snow, ice, rain, do you think it's still a good estimate?
Well,
That's an answer.
the daycare might be closed if it's extreme.
And again, the diverting the traffic onto the side streets to free up Teaneck Road, you're setting them up Hillside, down Oakdene, did you do a study on that at all?
We didn't do a study going down all the way to Queen Anne Road, but the amount of trips I have going down that way is well under 100, so I don't believe that a study is needed for that far down the road. And I do believe it's way less detrimental to have cars go that way than Oakdene Avenue and to that approach that is existing.
So no study on how long it would take to make a left on Queen Anne then? Or how many kids live on
I would
Hillside
say
or Oakdene or?
most cars going down to Queen Anne are going to make a right turn because they want to travel northbound. If you want to travel southbound,
That's
you
where you live.
would make the right onto
Okay, you get an assumption, or not, you didn't do any studies?
No, it's an assumption. Yes.
Before you go on, can you explain the significance of the 100 trips and the public?
It's state regulation for DOT that you don't have to analyze an intersection if it's less than 100 new trips.
Are there less than 100 trips even without this, or was it just based on this? Because I don't know if you're adding 100 trips anywhere.
No, we're not adding 100 trips anywhere.
Okay, so there was
to one specific
no
approach.
requirement for a study, and so you don't know, okay. Same with the parking, the on-street parking, there was no study on that, just guessing there's 50 spots?
Yes, that was an estimation. I didn't do an on-street parking study because I believe the site has enough spaces on site to accommodate.
And if they didn't, you were suggesting 50 spots, but
I was suggesting there would be
there
approximately.
was no study on the number of houses with no driveways that were on that need the off-street or shared driveways that have enough off-street parking.
There was no on-street study.
And then again, too, in inclement weather, if it's gonna snow, there's 0 off-street parking. Well, there's 3 spots on Hillside Avenue, it's in front of my house. It's kind of great. All right, so then it's just pretty much all guessing as far as the street effect and the parking.
Jack, we've done a parking study, we've done a traffic study.
We analyzed the most impactful intersections.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Hi.
Hello. Stephen Fishler.
Bring the mic down.
Bring the mic. Stephen Fishler. How's that? Okay, I was represented the council.
You just play in here for the record.
So I just had 2 questions. I'm not quite sure
Sir, I'm
what
sorry. Just want you to spell your name for the record.
Fischler.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, ask your question.
Okay, I'm not quite sure whether I missed the beginning of his question, but you directed the traffic, your plan out to exit on Hillside, and as you testified before, to get up to Queen Anne Road. I live on Hillside, and I know that's a very congested intersection. Has there been any traffic study of the impact of that traffic on Queen Anne Road?
There was no study done at that intersection. The site was designed to give the people the ability to go that way. I do not believe that it's a significant impact on that intersection for the amount of site generated I anticipate coming in.
And I have a bunch of questions, but only one more for you. In terms of the parking space allocations, all the different formulas, 300 meters, 25%. What I didn't see a reference in any of the documents were parking spaces for the employees who work at the recreational facility, the trainers, the receptionists. I mean, did you calculate parking spaces for those people?
All the requirements, that's counted in and built into those equations. So employees are accounted for.
So the 19 employees are, which we define as daycare employees, they're also recreational facility employees, the swimming pool people who work there?
It's all accounted for.
Thank you. Hi.
Melissa Johnson. Can you hear me?
No.
Melissa Johnson. I was not represented.
Right, I remember.
Melissa, you might have to take
You
it
gotta
out.
take it down and make it loud.
I have 2 or 3 questions. And
I'm unclear from what you testified earlier. You mentioned that your study, this is a traffic study, was based only on peak hours?
Yes, because that's the most impacted time period. Everything else will be less significant.
Less significant. Okay, so will there be a study for ongoing traffic outside of the peak areas? And I only ask that because we're looking at a peak area for peak hours. Sorry, for the daycare center. We're looking at peak hours for which other activities?
The community center as a whole.
As a whole. So I received some postcards, several, and I'm sure the other day. I don't know if the planning board has seen the literature that's gone out from AUCC to basically get business. It mentioned an adult center. It mentioned educational games. It mentioned summer camp. I think that would be more activity on top of the daycare. Birthday parties, pool parties. So I kind of am wondering, will there be a study conducted for ongoing traffic for a facility that's open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week?
Well, I use the Institute of Transportation Engineers, ITE, which their definition. It's the ITE is as far as a traffic engineer, it's our go-to resource as far as making a performing a traffic study. And the definition in ITE for a recreation community center incorporates all those uses, daycare and all those uses. And there's specific peak hours that are studied that it's only going to get less impactful on those other time periods. So I believe the peak hours are all that needs to be studied.
And what were they again?
They were the peak hour traffic incorporated 7 to 9 in the morning and then 4 to 6 in the afternoon.
So the answer is no.
Well, he testified that he studied what he's required to study in that peak hours, and he told you what peak hours are.
So the IT study, does it matter, I mean, it's a recreation subject for recreational centers, you said, does it matter where that center is located? I mean, would it be different if it was in like a rural area versus where we're sitting in a residential area completely surrounded and also with parking for most of those streets on both sides of the street parking? I mean, I drive down Hillside.
So the question is it different in a rural area?
And is it standard for wherever that center is, or is there variations?
The peak hours are standard, yes.
Regardless of location.
And is there a different land use code for urban, semi-urban, rural recreation centers?
I would have to check with the IT. There might be a different land use breakdown, but I believe I use the most conservative trip generation.
And okay.
How will we know in the future? He believes.
Well, what was your question? Are you saying for sure?
Hold on. That's why we have, the board has its own traffic consultant.
Okay.
And
they're here today.
they are here tonight, and they reviewed the traffic study. They didn't indicate that there was an issue with the ITE code that was utilized. So, and if there was,
I believe that it was the most appropriate.
That's correct, Mr. Distriani?
To clarify, the ITE does have a breakdown of general, suburban, and urban areas. The calculation that he used was based on a suburban area.
And you feel that's appropriate?
Yes, based on the characteristics of the neighborhood. It actually could be a blend depending on how you interpret the definition in the ITE regarding suburban and urban. It could really kind of blend to either. Urban actually has a lower parking demand because the idea being that there's more modes of transportation outside of there's more modes of transportation outside of a personal vehicle. So while there is availability of mass transit here, the idea is that I would say more than 50% of people would still use their cars. So the idea is that it would be a suburban environment. And the fifth addition that he referenced does have that 2.07 parking demand based on the area of the building.
Do you want to just explain for the public what it is the ITE does and how they
Yes,
create
how they
this
do it.
data, because it's an important.
Absolutely. So while the engineer did touch upon it, what the ITE is, it's a professional association of transportation engineers. What we do is we have numerous studies throughout different areas of different square footages, and they take these studies and they generate averages based on that. And that's based on characteristics of where the building is located. Like I said, you'll have rural, suburban, urban, as well as they'll look at it and break it down by, depending on the use, the square footage, employees, number of kids, any sort of factors depending on what that use is. The code, the land use code that he's referring to for a community center is based on square footage. So it would be 2.07 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. And that's based on X amount of studies that were done recently. The reason I bring up the difference between the 4th edition and 5th edition is that the 5th edition came out recently and it has more data and more updated data that helps clarify some of the uses. So as I stated earlier, this community center use that's used and referenced in the ITE, that includes childcare facilities, gyms, swim clubs, athletic facilities, all mixed together that you would typically see at like a Y MCA type facility.
We use the 4th or the 5th edition.
So they initially used the 4th. He did clarify in his testimony, and we noted in our reference letter that the 5th generation does have a lower parking demand. So based on the size of the facility, which is about 45,000 square feet, it would be a parking demand of 93 parking spaces. Whereas on site, they're proposing 100, keeping in mind that 11 of those are tandem spaces.
Now, the ITE number, the 2.07 per 1,000, that's not like the median, is it, or is it a 95?
That is, so it's not even in average of a study, it's the 85th percentile. So what they do is they generate a curve based on data points, and this is the 85th percentile of that. So it's not saying, it's not even a median, it's even more conservative than that.
And what that means is it a standard deviation, or is it that 15% of the facilities would require more than that number and 85 would not, or how does it work?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
I was sitting on your right side. I couldn't see the map when you were speaking regarding the streets and the 50 spaces, 50 off-street parking spaces that you said would most likely be available. Where were they?
That was a rough estimate of the parking available on Oakdene Avenue in between Morningside Terrace and Teaneck Road, on Hillside Avenue between Morningside Terrace and Hillside Road, and also Morningside Terrace in between Hillside and Oakdene.
So just the perimeter of the property only?
Correct, and further to the east.
Did your study include the adjacent Morningside between Hillside and DeGraw?
No, that was just an estimation we did right now, but no, we didn't include that.
Nor did it include Oakdene or Hillside further? I think I heard that. It didn't include Oakdene to Hillside going on. The spaces?
Oakdene to Hillside,
From Morningside going toward Queen.
we estimated,
Just that?
yes.
that corner.
And that was in relation to a question from the board, how many spaces do you feel are on the perimeter of the property? The testimony is being that we feel that we're providing enough on-site parking to address
I'm
the
speaking about off-site. Are you aware of the number of two-family homes on Morningside?
I am not.
There are 3 of them, and they have 14 parking spaces.
Yeah, again, just to clarify, because it was my question, the applicant is testifying that they have enough spaces, but my question related to what happened in the event of a special event. As I said, I gave the case of some celebrity or a politician or something like that will sell out the community. There's widespread community interest, and everybody shows up. And I want to know, in that event, what would happen and how many spaces would be available on the street. That was my question.
Absolutely. So my question is, and I'm not sure, I don't know the exact time that you did your study, what happens every evening when
homeowners come home from work and there's no parking, and they use that morning side between Oakdene and Hillside because there's no parking until the commuters come back and get
I
off the bus.
don't anticipate any on-street parking related to this facility. But it is there just in case, but I don't anticipate that.
You're saying,
So-
I'm confusing on street and off street.
We're not anticipating the need to park on the street. We're not. The whole point of this application and kind of the genesis of the changes that have been made, we've added, I think originally it was 63 or 64 spaces at the site, and we brought it up to 100 spaces, just to make sure that we can accommodate all the people who are coming to this site on the property.
So is it no longer true that the facility, according to the planning board, requires more than 100 spaces, or it hasn't changed?
Well, no, hold on. No, wait, no, hold on, okay. So the testimony from the applicant is, we think we have enough. The board's traffic consultant indicated, based upon one metric for calculating what true demand is, they're gonna need approximately 93 parking spaces. They say they have 100, including 11 that are tandem, so it's 89 fully accessible spaces and then 11 that could have a car park. The board has to decide based on all of the facts, the fact that they need a use variance, the fact that there's parking, a number of potentially different parking requirements as part of its deliberations on the entire case, what the parking requirement is, and then is there enough, number one, and if there's not enough, do they get a variance for it? And that has not happened yet because we don't have all the evidence and testimony yet.
So our numbers are 93 and 100 now?
No. Well, the number that we have is there are 100 parking spaces on site. There are 11 tandem spaces. There are ordinance requirements. There is the estimate from the ITE, which is the standard in the industry for what all transportation engineers, including the board's engineer, utilizes in evaluating what the parking demand is.
So the 90 spaces are inclusive of the employee parking spaces?
Yes.
90 is total?
The ITE estimates that this facility, based upon the most current data, when did the IT 5th edition parking come out? October. So within the last couple months, and there's usually the ITE studies have dozens of their own parking studies. What they do is they go out and actually count real life facilities and say, this is how big it is, this is the parking requirement for it, these are the types of components that are typically inside. And this is what it needs, this is what they have. That's what it is. And that's what engineers rely on.
So our point is, IT's saying we need 93 spaces, we're providing 100 on-site spaces. That's why we didn't do an on-street parking study per se.
On-street
parking.
And an on-street parking study will not be done?
Well, it's not required, and then that represents that they need on-street parking. But again, my question related to that unusual event that may or may not happen, where again, some unique event draws an enormous amount of people out of the ordinary, and that the idea I gave you was a politician or a celebrity or some sort of, God forbid, community tragedy, and the entire place is taken up. What's available in the street? So we're not asking them to make the street available, but I just wanted to get a sense of what would happen in that idea. And I think the community needs to know.
I get that, but looking at the usage, the proposed usage of the building,
Right.
in my mind, it just seems like there's going to be more people, because we're constantly talking about a swim meet. And from the testimony back in August,
I think we're getting in the testimony. This is a lengthy.
No, I'm telling you what was said. When we have a
But
swim
this is
meet,
for
it's not,
questions,
when we have a
right?
swim meet, it's not with one school, it's with a minimum of 2. So we have 2 school buses that we're worrying about that may stay on site or may not stay on site.
There's not two. The testimony was Teaneck does not bus their students to a home game.
No,
if it's in Teaneck.
there are 2 visiting teams.
No, there's only going to be Teaneck. Testimony's been
That
Teaneck High
was the
School
testimony.
will swim against one other team.
He said
That's
one,
a
he
dual
said
meet.
one, sometimes 2. That's what the Suki swim coach said.
We agreed that it'll be a dual meet swim,
So now we're
swim
getting
event.
to dual meets.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, so that he's stating that there's going to be 2 Teaneck and 1 other school. What was testified was that there would be 2 schools.
I don't recall one or the other.
So I guess you have to look back at the.
Yeah.
At the
There's no reason, we're stipulating that there's only gonna be Teaneck High School and a visitor.
Okay, so that's, that. the
That takes care of it.
Yeah, that's that, the applicant.
So that's
And if the board acts favorably on the application, there will be a stipulation that there cannot be. Cannot. And it would be a violation of the approval, if it's approved, to have more than 2 teams. One of which would be Teaneck. There's not going to be, I don't think that this facility is going to be hosting meets for 2 schools that are not related.
That was the whole genesis for agreeing to cap the number employee at 150 was based upon 2 swim teams being there.
Right.
If you had 3 swim teams being there, that number would, could come on the list.
Yeah, and that same testimony was also stated that.
Like everything else is enforced in this town.
You said a 3-month window?
I think
It's
it's
November to February.
November, February, the Teaneck swim season.
For the season.
Right.
Okay, so my other questions were basically for the on-street parking, the multiple houses without driveways, the 2-family homes and shared driveways.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna, I guess
But at
it's
this
not
point, I
important, it's not
think you're
important.
repetitive questioning, and I'm almost getting the feeling that
Okay.
we might be asking the same question over and over again.
I don't have a driveway from my house, so this is very important to me. And I have
But we can
neighbors who
only
don't have
answer the same
driveways.
question.
First of all, wait, one at a time,
Sure.
please. The
So-
stenographer is really not gonna.
As far as making the point that your questions seem to be coming back to on-street parking, they're legitimate questions, but I believe that they've answered the question already about on-street parking, that on-street parking is not required, nor are they stating they need on-street parking. And again, the only reason it was brought up is my question related to that unique event where there's overflow requirements. They are not saying that it's going to happen, but what would happen, and that was my question.
So what would happen? Do we get a traffic study when there's a problem next year or in the future or after the building is built? What is the repercussions for the taxpayers and for us, you know?
The board considers the application as it's presented. The applicants presented testimony and evidence based on a professional engineer. The board has its engineer. The board was expecting to have potentially contrary evidence from another traffic engineer. I don't know if that's still in the offing, but the board would receive that evidence, and it would weigh all of that evidence if anybody wanted to bring someone to give that evidence. But the board needs to act. It can't focus.
It can't focus on street parking?
No, what it can't focus on is, the board has testimony from an expert. The board can't say, there's a case from Burgersville where the residents were concerned about the traffic testimony that the applicant's traffic engineer put on, and they said, that's not true, you should ignore it. And the board didn't. They didn't have any contrary expert testimony. And when the applicant took it to court, the court reversed them and said, you improperly ignored the applicant's traffic testimony without any competing or contrary testimony. So if the board wants to disregard it, it needs a reason to do it. And typically the way that happens, and I'm not saying that the board would in any event, and because I don't make that decision. If you want a traffic study about the availability or the lack of availability of on-street parking as it relates to impacts to the neighborhood, that's something that the board would accept, but it's not going to go out and do it, particularly because the applicant has presented testimony to say, we don't need any on-street parking. The board's traffic consultant agrees. If there's a reason that someone missed something, it needs to be presented to the board.
Is there an opportunity later on to, or is this the opportunity to speak to?
It's the applicant.
This gentleman is from support of Teaneck, right?
Correct. So he hasn't testified yet.
Okay.
After the applicant presents its case, after the any member of the public testifies or presents a witness, the board's professionals will be asked questions and testify. At that time, they will theoretically be open to the public for questioning also.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Just a quick clarification for the record. I got the two manuals flipped around. The release date of the fifth edition is February of 2019, not October. So still recent, but just a minor clarification.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erica Godfrey. That's G-O-T-T, like in Tom, F as in Frank, R-I-E-D as in David. I live at 184 Hillside Avenue, and I was previously represented.
Thank you. Which question?
I have only one question, and I'm not sure it can be answered, but this question is directed to the issue of the time that it will take to bring the children in from being dropped off. And it should be answerable, because what I want to know is how many child care workers are currently employed at the center?
I'm not sure. Is that a question you can
Is
answer?
that something you can answer?
No, not effective to this.
Okay.
It's not
Is that-
really
yeah,
that-
okay,
yeah.
so who could answer that?
I believe that the applicant has already testified as to their operations. I don't know if we would call them back, but that,
That's Mr. Burrow's decision.
yeah.
Okay, well, that is germane to the question of, how long it will take, because we only have the applicant's word for it, that there will be people to do it, or enough people to do it.
You can address that to another witness.
Okay.
Mr. Burton has to be,
Okay.
Okay, that's what I.
Is
yeah,
he
that's what I wanted.
is he here tonight?
no, that's not.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello. My name is Sabrina Mukler Ayanikon. That's M-C-C-L-U-R-E. Second name is I-A-N-A-C-O-N-E. I'm at 114 Oakdene Avenue.
Were you represented by Ms. Price?
No, I wasn't. I'm kind of new to the process, so I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask this to, but I often go to work going down Oakdene Avenue.
Eastbound or which way?
Towards Teaneck Road, and then I have to turn right onto Teaneck Road. Because it's a one-way street, sometimes I have a lot of issues with people who want to turn left, and for some reason, they go all the way to the right to turn left.
That's just rude.
Yes. Is there, I don't know if this is a question for you, is there anything that we can do, that the city can do
kind of-
to help with that?
Not our property.
That's a Teaneck.
So is that a question?
No, that's not for the board. That's the police or the DPW if they get striped or something like that.
Okay, all right. And then my other question, and probably not for you, but I'm not quite sure when to ask it, is, so let's say everything goes through the way it is, or there's some changes, or, just everything goes through. And as neighbors, we have issues with either parking or traffic or lights. Who do we go to?
Is your applicant willing to have a liaison? Or?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the first meeting in August of last year, where, Mr. Salem testified that we would provide a community liaison so that there are issues, we would be in contact with the neighborhood, so they can contact us, so we can be aware of it.
So, I mean, I understand if it's lights or things like that, but what if it is parking
No,
or
it's a
traffic?
great question, and it's done all the time, where the applicant, in this case, the community center will provide a liaison, or make that person aware of the community, perhaps a backup number or two, so you get in touch with that person if there is an issue.
Okay. And when they don't resolve it, is there, I don't know, an arbitrator?
Okay.
Is there?
If you feel that the applicant is somehow breaking the law or not living up to the commitment that they made, then you can certainly, you would resort to the municipality, the building department, or whoever, police department, or whoever would be involved in that issue. That they they would look into it and they would investigate, but it's not the realm of this board.
No, I understand that, but I was just trying to understand, you know, what if everything goes through and
It
we.
depends on what the issue is.
Okay.
Is it a fire issue, is it a traffic issue, what part of, what department of the township?
Okay, all right.
Let us know, something's going on, we want to know that.
Okay, all right.
That's why there's a liaison between all the.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Hi,
My name is Ellen Rivera, 87 Oakdene.
what's your last name, please?
Rivera, R-I-V for Victor, E-R-A.
And were you represented?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I just have one question. When you did your study, the traffic study, did you take into account the Teaneck has private garbage collection? And we sometimes have 4 companies that pick up garbage on the street, different days at various times. A lot of that falls in within the peak time. Also, what about when there's recycling collection? On a one-way street, that is.
Well, that's the question, Sanders.
I did not.
Was that taken into account?
I didn't witness any garbage or any recycling during my study, but I would say if they would pick it up on the side of the road, there's enough room for cars to pass, but then they would have to wait.
Well, if you can, I'm just saying, because a lot of times they stop right in the middle of the street and come back and forth to get the garbage. And there are 4 different garbage companies that come and pick up on our street. The town doesn't provide that. Same thing happens recycling. You have one recycling for the plastic and the glass, and then somebody else separate comes for the paper.
I think you're making a good point, but I'm not sure it's a.
Well, I was just wondering if that was taken into account.
I believe he said he didn't witness that happening, so you can't testify something he didn't say.
Also, because our block is the last straight one that comes through, there's also the firehouse that's there on Teaneck Road on the corner of Fenimore and Teaneck Road. They come down that block, I would say a good 4 times a week. That's their back and forth as they're going to Teaneck Road. Take that into account, like you're parking on both sides of the street and all this extra going on. How are they going to get back and forth? You know, garbage trucks, recycling,
So do you see your application being impacted anyway by?
From a level of service standpoint with volume, it's not affected by garbage trucks, and that's an existing condition of the local traffic.
But with the extra added traffic getting onto Teaneck
Right, so
Road.
that's the question I asked, whether this application will add more traffic and compound any situation that you're.
It already causes a little bit of a thing sometimes. You know, you might not have been there.
Yeah.
You know, you can't be there 24/7, granted, we live there. But I'm just saying it does happen, and if you have this extra activity going on during these peak periods, and that falls into a lot of times when they do the recycling, when.
There might be any increase of 2 cars impact, but nothing significant.
Well, just wondering if that was taken into account, because a lot of times it does block us even getting out of the driveway. You think, oh, hey, that's part of life. But with this extra activity, it could.
It wasn't
be a
taken into
problem.
account because it wasn't observed, but.
Well, they do pick up garbage. Okay.
My name is Jean Freck, Jeaafreck. I live on Hillside Avenue, and I was previously represented by the attorney. I wanted to ask you, when you say you did this traffic study and you observed, what did you actually do?
We counted the amount of cars in a 2-hour window, a peak in the morning and in the afternoon, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. of 2 impacted intersections. In this case, it was the Oakdene Avenue, Teaneck Road intersection and the Hillside Avenue, Teaneck Road intersection.
So when you say you observed, you mean you actually parked somewhere and watched?
Correct.
Have you ever tried driving these intersections and seeing what you have to do?
I have. I've been back and forth to the site maneuvering frequently, yeah.
And we have you notice there's 2 gas stations right at the end of Oakdene there that
Yes.
sometimes interferes with the traffic and turning?
Yes.
Okay, when you say neighborhood, how far does the neighborhood extend that you do the traffic study for?
We try to pick out the intersections that will be impacted the most. And in this case, there's really only 2 intersections to count. And then you disperse the site proposed trips to that intersection to see if there's a significant increase in delay of any kind.
So you really haven't gone up to Queen Anne Road by a hillside to see what it's like to do that either, or to turn on the side streets out to DeGraw, where some of the parents or participants in the city, in this community center would try, to see what the difficulties are?
I haven't analyzed every turn in the neighborhood.
Well, I don't know if you see what I see, because there are a lot of danger spots. And with a lot of increased traffic, there's buses also on Queen Anne Road. Making a right onto Queen Anne Road is no fun, even a left sometimes is. So there's a lot of bad areas. Also, Morningside. People barrel up hillside over Morningside. And I try to back out of my driveway. And I want to know if you've ever looked at things like that, because this is part of the whole neighborhood.
Just if you can, just frame it before question, like the response.
Well, have you done this? Have you done that? That's what I'm asking you, because I think some of the things really need to be looked at. So that's why I'm asking if you've really traveled around, or asked people where they feel the problem spots are, and maybe how to avoid some of these. With more traffic on Hillside and no stop signs on Morningside,
could you let him answer the question? You asked a bunch of them, he needs to answer.
I didn't specifically study those intersections in question because they are not as impacted as the ones that we did study. But it's really, from the sound of it, it's not a volume issue with delays.
well, why don't you think it might be impacted? Other people think it might be impacted. I'm not trying to get antagonistic, but I'm just finding.
You have to give him a chance to answer because he didn't finish.
I think he's already given the answers already.
The nature of a traffic engineer is to go out and do a study, and that's what he does based upon an accepted practice of trip generation, of what he would. It's not his job to go out into the community and find the trouble spots in the community. That's not the nature of what an engineer does. You may have a very valid point, and those are key issues, but it's not the nature of what we ask an engineer to do in studying the traffic situation.
So the neighborhood is just this little block. It's
No.
not the rest of the area that's a block or two either way.
The purpose of the traffic study in this context is because the applicant is seeking a use variance, where you're proposing a permitted use. The amount of traffic that's generated from the use is anticipated by the zone. The purpose of this inquiry is to determine, by doing something not contemplated by the zoning, is the traffic generated from this development going to it and out from it going to impact the road network in a substantial way that would be detrimental to the neighborhood. The fact that there are people on the roads now doing things that are disfavorable is not within the board's purview as it relates to the granting of the variance relief that's sought here.
I'm not talking about disfavorable. I'm just talking about how the area is as it is physically.
I think you defined it.
And I just wonder why these areas aren't considered. Like, for instance, you said there's 180 trips anticipated in the PM, is that correct?
Yes, that's total trips, that's including ins and outs in the site.
Do you think that's a lot of traffic for an area that doesn't have this traffic now? And people, maybe, do you think people will try all these different ways and it's going to be crazy and there's going to be accidents?
I do not believe the increase in traffic due to our development will significantly impact those roadways.
Okay, well then I disagree. Is there a time later that we can bring up this?
At the end of the application, with all testimony.
Just remember that the thing that I talked about while you were waiting online, the fact that I don't mean this disrespectfully, he's an expert and he's given an expert opinion. A layperson's disagreement is not a reason for the board to, hold on. It's not a valid reason for the board to not consider that opinion. If you have evidence, that's different, but just disagreement without a reason, a scientifically based reason that can be analyzed by the board and its professional. You're free to give it, but I'm just telling you how the board has to evaluate it.
Okay.
And that's not to say that we don't value your opinion. Those are the rules that the courts of New Jersey have imposed on land use rights.
And just one question. I mean, you realize that while this is a use variance application, some of the permitted uses on this property are public schools, administrative facilities, recreation facilities, libraries, and other public buildings and structures. So those are permitted uses on the property, which, other than the fact that they are public and not private, are extremely similar to what's being proposed in this application, in our opinion.
I don't know if this is my place to answer you guys. I assume when schools are set up and other places and libraries are set up, all these things are taken into consideration. You're saying it's grandfathered in from what I'm hearing from you. Is that correct?
I was just listing the other permitted uses on the property.
The board has to consider whether the increase in traffic is, if there is one, is a substantial detriment to the neighborhood.
Now, I'm talking neighborhood, I'm not talking draw, I'm just talking volume, and I'm not talking about kids and what times and all that stuff.
I understand.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff Powers, Teaneck. Actually, I'm going to ask a couple of questions relate both to the parking and to the traffic, and then focus more on the traffic questions. I remain confused throughout, but you have, again, as have some of your predecessors, cited 300 members of this community center as the number. And I want to understand whether or not, from your understanding, that means 300 separate human individuals, including children, spouses, parents, etc.
That is my understanding.
So no member will be permitted to bring anyone else from their family who is not a member. Yeah. Is that correct?
That is my understanding.
This was testified to previously. There's 300 members of the community. 300 individuals will have membership. It's not 300 family memberships, which would equate to 1,200 people.
But everything rests on that 300 number being it. So I'm remain very confused about the possibility of some unusual event having some huge additional crowd. Is that something which has in fact been suggested by the chair? Is that something that you understand could not happen by virtue of the definition you just gave me about membership?
From the anticipated events that I'm aware of this facility, I believe there is adequate parking. And
No, that's not the question. The question is whether or not there could, given the limitation of 300 separate individuals, who are the only people who are being accounted for, either in terms of traffic generation or in terms of parking need. I don't understand how there could be an unusual event which would draw a huge number of additional people. So either that should be stipulated and never happen, or it is part of the discussion.
it's not all the 300, not all based on the 300 members. There's also the ITA that was based on gross square footage of the building. So those are studies for similar gross square footage of the building that might be having these events as well. So, and there's actual studies done to get these numbers.
They relate to traffic generation as well?
Yes.
I want to now, and actually, some of the specificity of my questions that relate to the fact that I'm a recent full professor in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Vanderbilt University.
At which university?
Vanderbilt University. 188 in the evening, in that peak period. Per hour?
Yes, that's peak hour.
And 144 in the AM per hour.
In the peak hour.
In the peak hour.
Correct.
Per hour.
Well, in the peak hours, which are accounted for in his 2-hour sequences. Is that correct? Correct. Thank you. What is the algorithm used to calculate that there will be an additional only 5 people trying to turn left on the Teaneck Road?
Yes.
What's the algorithm? Not just your guess about it or something. I want to know, and I don't want you to just tell me about it.
I think he understands the question.
Okay.
Yes, there was no algorithm to determine that. That was anticipated from the traffic distribution. That's the closest thing to a mathematical formula I use. But basically, we designed the site to minimize cars going to that problematic approach. That is why we designed the site this way.
But you were quite specific about 5. How did you get 5?
A combination of...
Tell me the algorithm. How did you do it?
Answer the question, sir.
It's the combination of the trip generation in the area and how we anticipate the proposed trips dispersing in the traffic network. I don't feel like people will wait on that left turn when there's a means of going another direction.
We'll get to that. The issue of 58.1 seconds per left turn on the Teaneck Road,
yes,
given the what now will be 105 additional people making that turn. How many people do you think makes that turn now?
105 additional people?
No, I said 5 additional.
Right now, there were 14 cars turning left onto Teaneck Road from Oakdene Avenue.
That occurred when? Only once? Or
in the study peak
hour. Was that the average?
No, that was the study peak hour. The
entire peak hour. You only found 14 people. I found it extraordinary.
During the peak hour.
I've been on that.
That's an answer.
So that was, and then again, how did you get the 5?
I used a combination of the existing traffic distribution and the anticipated movements.
And that was a guess you were making about people going up hillside.
Yes, I like to think traffic is almost like water. It travels the path of least resistance.
Yeah. And let's go back to some questions rightly asked of you earlier. What is the level of traffic on Queen Anne headed north?
I did not.
Oh.
He's testified to that.
That is a half mile down the road. I did
Oh,
not.
I know that.
Yeah, I did not.
You're not telling me that. I'm asking you, how did you figure out what the...
Dr. Powers.
I'm sorry.
You're going to want to listen to this CD, I know, so one at a time.
You bet. You don't know what the level of traffic is on Queen Anne during peak hours?
We did not study Queen Anne Road.
So, but you are saying that has a lesser volume of traffic without knowing, without looking at it?
No, I'm saying people that go to Queen Anne Road will not make, most of them will not make a left-hand turn. They will turn right because they can easily go on to Oakdene and make a right on Teaneck to travel south.
What if Queen Anne is just as congested as Teaneck Road is?
We tried to design the site to make it possible to make right-hand turns onto those problematic streets.
That's not the question I asked.
What was the
The question was, how did you know what the level of traffic was and whether or not it is less than on Teaneck Road?
I believe we're not generating enough traffic onto Queen Anne Road to warrant an analysis.
Like you're saying, it's easier, people are gonna, it's like water that's going to flow, but you don't know what it has, what the floodwaters is, it has to get past in order to get on Queen Anne Road, is that right? That's only a portion of mile. I'm going to come back to your half mile in a minute. A half mile you're going to take us from Morningside on up to Queen Anne Road. You did acknowledge that there's traffic on both sides of that road.
Traffic on both sides.
Sorry, and parking on both sides of that road.
Correct.
And you proposed, without any, so far as I can tell, scientific analysis or even observation, that people, when they are encountering traffic coming down, which one can very well assume that they will be doing, trying to get to Teaneck Road at a considerable volume coming off Queen Anne, right? Okay. Where are people supposed to pull off in order to let people go by?
My answer to that.
You're adding 100 cars per hour with that.
Not in every direction. It's spread out the best of our ability as designers of this site.
No.
Yes.
Wait a second. Say it again, I did not understand that.
You said there was 100 trips in one intersection or one road. We are spreading out those 100.
You have said that Hillside is going to be where, because traffic flows like water, there's going to be 100 additional cars going up Hillside Avenue in order to take the pressure off the turns onto Teaneck Road.
There won't be 100 additional cars.
Well, that's what you said, sir.
I said
It's your own
100.
testimony.
I said I would like to hear, if I said that, I misspoke. There's not 100
Yes, sir, you
cars.
said, so you would.
Honestly, can we allow it, or is it to get illicit answers?
What it is, I'm trying to figure out the difference between.
But he's trying to figure out your questions, too, so you gotta give him an opportunity to answer.
What question does he not know about?
What's the current question?
Okay. You surmise that the reason there will not be severe impact, traffic impact to that community during those peak hours is because people with traffic like water are going to flow north up toward Queen Anne, whose actual level of traffic you haven't looked at, and who must get there by way of a road that can't possibly allow two people to pass each other.
So you're
when
testifying.
cars,
You're
no,
testifying.
am I right about Pete? No, I'm testifying to what he testified about
You
that.
can't testify, it's a question.
Okay, I'm questioning. Well, he already has testified.
Okay, you both made your point. Ask your question or move
Ask the
on.
question instead of telling him what he testified to.
What reason do we have for you to make the generalization that 100 cars can usefully try to get the additional half mile up the Queen Anne Road in order to relieve the excessive traffic pressure on Teaneck Road?
Right now, we have in the AM approximately 50 cars going that direction on Hillside to Queen Anne. And in the PM, we have 77 cars going in that direction. State standards are you do not have to analyze an intersection if you're not net increasing 100 trips. So that is not why we did not analyze that intersection.
I'm not saying you have to analyze. All I'm saying is I question what is the basis for your generalization from which you have no data.
And I believe he answered
And
the
he
question.
testified to the grounds.
Let's move on to the next
for
question.
So-
I would like to consider that. I want to ask a question. It's very clear to me, and I understand it, that your task is to talk about traffic performance, not the impact on the community. Am I correct about that? That's why you look only at peak hours. That's why you refuse to answer any questions about, am I right?
Are you
Discussing-
dictating?
No, I'm
Why are you answering
asking,
questions?
why is it you wouldn't answer the question about the 24-hour impact? And
Because
that's not part of your job.
it is
that
our
right?
standard as traffic engineers to analyze the most critical peak hour, which
So
I
this,
did in my
am I right that the board should only be concerned with your testimony in relation to
So that's
traffic
not important. That's not
performance?
You can't testify to what the board should only
Please, sir.
consider.
I'm trying to figure out what his generalizations look like, sir.
He has answered your question as to what his testimony is. Now, continue.
I want to ask you, have I not pointed out that there are areas in which you have made generalizations for which you don't have either sufficient algorithms to actually justify what you said tonight?
I do not believe Queen Anne Road intersection needs to be analyzed because we're not generating 100 trips to that intersection. And I have gone and made a right turn at that intersection during peak hour. And I made the right turn.
And the trip for that half hour was comfortable and easy and didn't involve all kinds of deviations to get by?
It was not significant.
Congratulations, sir.
Okay, at this point, I have to close the questioning period. I mean,
No problem. Questions with people who already asked questions, asking more questions.
Absolutely. They've had an opportunity to ask questions. They've had a fair opportunity to participate.
No, I really-
and
I really-
cross-examine.
I really have, how much limited is people haven't asked questions. The applicant is entitled to put the next witness on, and we've already gone past 10 o'clock. Can you accomplish anything in 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, I
It's
really.
in relation to what was just said, I just have
I
one question.
object to the banter.
Of course, yes.
I'm not bantering, I have one question. There's one question that each.
Mr. Chairman, there should be no more questions from
I-
members of the
I- I'm
public
not-
who already had an opportunity. I'd like to.
Well, I've already stated my position, and I have to agree with it, that there's sufficient time. Mr. Eliano.
My name is Debbie Eliahu. My question, I have basically questions about the winter conditions and multiple drop-offs. Have you considered what happens when somebody is dropping off more than one child? Because in a daycare, it is not inconceivable that somebody would have more than one child that needs to be dropped off, and how would that impact the queuing?
I do think it'll take a little bit longer with 2 children, but as far as the impact, I do think there's enough queuing on site. And if there's enough attendees walking the kids into the school, I believe this traffic control will work.
And have you gone to any of the other daycare facilities in the area that use this kind of system of drop-off where somebody picks up in the winter under snow or ice conditions, and seen what it does to the time that it takes to get a child out? I'm talking from experience here. And I'm also talking to somebody who, not at that time, fell and shattered an ankle.
No testimony, please. Just answer your question.
Okay.
I
So
have
they-
not witnessed those conditions, but I imagine it would take a little more time.
Would it not be worth finding out how much it adds to the time?
Considering it hasn't snowed so much this year, I don't know how I can.
The testimony previously was that your opinion was it would not be a significant delay, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
do it every winter. Kids
Go
go to
ahead.
school.
Go ahead.
Before he calls the next witness, have we agreed on a date?
Well, we're gonna have to carry this, so, I guess the next.
Sir, wait, Mr. Hall. Hold on. Sorry.
One more question. I'm sorry. Maybe you can walk me through it, I wasn't, or maybe if you answered it already, I'm not sure. So according to the code, the applicant's required to provide 237 spaces.
No. Our position is that is not accurate.
Well, I understand. Okay,
There's
so.
an interpretation of the code, the most conservative, which the applicant has indicated that they are appealing to the extent applicable. And they're asking the board to make a determination using its interpretive powers under the ordinance.
I understand, but our code enforcement officer.
Correct.
has told the board that 237 spaces are required.
No.
He has not. Isn't that's on the denial then?
That's not my understanding.
The spaces were broken down by square footage of the building and by different use. That's how it was broken down.
I understand.
How they use it, it was a worst-case scenario because that's what I have to do to protect the town. The board has to kind of pick and choose the uses of what they think is appropriate for the building, and then kind of go from there. We broke down the daycare versus the square footage of the building. We broke down the community center that we thought, based on the building plans that they gave us, to the square footage of the building. We broke down the sanctuary rooms. The code has different formulas for different uses. It doesn't mean that all the uses are going to be used to the maximum use all at the same time. I can only take the book, and my job is to do a worst case to protect the town, to give the board the information of a worst case scenario. And like what was testified here, it's up to the board to decide how and when they're gonna use the building.
I understand, I get it, but 237, if you take all the uses, it requires 237. So my question then,
Which is basically comes out to more than 300 people in the building. So you could either base it on the square footage ratio versus the parking, or they can agree to a restriction of X amount of number of members and base it on numbers of members versus parking spaces.
I get it,
We first have to decide what it is.
Right.
but
Before we determine how much they need.
They have to tell you what it is.
no, because I find that a little troubling. If the code, if you take all the uses and add them up,
Correct.
and that comes out to 237, not suggesting that you're gonna need 237, but the code, if you add up all the uses, says 237. My question for Mr. Huff, was, walk me back from the 237 to explain to me why 100 works.
Okay.
Show me
Yes.
where whether it's a time of day, whether it's a membership limitation, whether it's whatever, takes me down below.
Can I assist in this, only because I think it's a
legal question.
It's a legal question more so than a traffic question or a parking question. In my opinion, yes, because it's how you interpret the ordinance. For you to back all that number, well, maybe I can give it a try.
Won't be testable.
So, 237 parking spaces, as I indicated, you took every use, possible definable use, that was shown on the plans, and consider them to be individual uses, right? Individual traffic generators. You come to a number of 237 spaces. So you have, what we're saying is, the biggest traffic generator is 118 spaces for the pool, all right? Because the pool is based upon the maximum occupancy of the room of biggest public assembly for a community center. In this case, it's the pool, all right? That's the biggest room, that's the most amount of people you can put in there. Well, how do you figure out how many people you can put in a pool? So the code says you look at the capacity requirements and look at the international pool code to see how many people you could legally put in a pool of this size, right? So that's and including the bleachers and including the kiddie pool and all that. So that's 480 people. By code, you can put that many in there. Practically, I mean, we never have it, but, so you have 118 spaces for the community center, okay? Right?
For the pool.
For the community center.
The whole building?
Yeah, the community center is based upon.
The largest generator.
Yes, which is the pool room, all right? So you have 118. Now, we had testimony that we're gonna have membership, 300 members. So you have a provision in your ordinance that says recreational facilities directly assign number of parking spaces per member, right? So it's one space for every 4 members. So that's a 75 space requirement. So the analysis is, you're a community center, you have members, so you could also possibly be a recreational facility. So now let's add 118 to 75, and you have that number, all right? Don't make me do it. Thank you. So the next use you have, we have an interfaith prayer room, sanctuary room, which also qualified definition-wise potentially as a house of worship. House of worship was also a previously approved use at the property. That alone, a house of worship has its own parking requirement. And that's based upon the square footage of the room, requires 22 parking spaces. So that got added. Then you have the daycare facility. Our argument was that, you know, per statute, when it's in a building like this, it's not a standalone use, statute prohibits you from adding a parking calculation for the child care. Regardless of that, the Teaneck ordinance requires 22 parking spaces for that use, all right? So you add all those up, you get the 297. 237. It's our position that some of these uses that are being described as standalone uses, standalone parking generators are actually amenities of the facility, okay?
So is it then that you're saying that the board don't double count, for instance, the sanctuary room, because it's already being included into the community center?
The sanctuary room is only available to community center members, of which there are 300. So why would you have 75 spaces for the community center and then an additional 22 spaces?
It's not a separate.
It's not a separate use. It's a separate room that's utilized by the same member.
So just, I get it. So if you have, so the people who are using the gym facility, the people who are using the pool, other than the swim meets,
Yes.
the people who are using the, does that apply to, they're limited to 75 parking spaces, not limited to 75 parking spaces, but the requirement of 75 applies to the people who are swimming. The same 75 applies to the people who are finished swimming and now on the treadmill, right? So I get that. You have another, however many, what was it? It was 38 or something,
Yeah,
right?
38
For the pool.
Correct. If you use the pool as a separate generator for traffic, then based about 150 people max.
Well, it's a separate generator because it's for the swim meet. It's not related to the. It's not related to the membership.
Correct. So it's
that's a separate generator.
The 7 days a year there will be a swim meet. Yes.
Plus some training, I guess.
Yep. Practice.
And so the other separate generator, not related to membership, is the daycare or the.
The daycare, yes. There's been
At least that portion of the daycare that comes from the Board of Ed.
No, it's a child care. It's a licensed child care, so it falls under the statute to the exemption from the parking requirement. That's our.
So it's not part of the parking. It's not part of the. So you're saying there is no.
By statute, you're not permitted to assign a parking requirement to a licensed child care center that's in a building with another use.
For the floor area.
Floor area, correct.
So what the statute says is that the floor area occupied in any building or structure as a child care center shall be excluded in calculating any parking requirement otherwise applicable to that number of units or amount of floor area space as appropriate under state or local law or regulations adopted thereunder. So and it's your position, the daycare itself doesn't have a parking requirement, and you're also not calculating the parking based on the square footage of that portion of the building?
Correct.
Okay. I don't know.
Just get used as the square footage.
It basically comes down to, Mike, you got your choice. Once again, my job is to do a worst case scenario. I think the board has to decide whether they want to use the number of occupants per square foot, or they want to use the number of occupants that are actually occupants.
Right, no, right, and I understand I understand that the 300 people, the 300 members can't be doing two things at once. And so they're either gonna be in the pool or they're gonna be on the treadmill, but not gonna be on the pool and, in the pool and the treadmill, so it's not a separate parking generator.
Right.
Okay, so if we add up the parking generators, what number do you come up with?
Well, there's two questions, right? For the ordinance or for the traffic engineers?
Well, we already, it's not traffic, it's a legal thing, right? It's not a traffic, it's not a traffic.
Like, there's been testimony that 93 is the number for a community center of this size.
Well, that's what the demand should be.
Demand should be.
But what's the requirement is different.
Correct. Honestly, what I think makes sense, and this is, the board's got to decide itself. You have membership here, all right? So you can determine how many parking spaces are based on membership. That makes sense, right? If you have 300 members, then you should have 75 parking spaces per the code. That's a reasonable equation to make. To require 118 spaces based upon 480 people are in a pool, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, to be
I get
honest.
that.
So 75 for the recreation center makes sense to me.
What's my other parking generator?
Your other parking generator on the site, you're gonna have a daycare facility, so
22.
22 for the code. So right there, you have 97 spaces. So those are the two biggest parking generators on a daily basis. Now you're gonna have a swim team that's using it 3 months out of the year, 4 months out of the year during non-peak hours, and the daycare is not operating that way, at its peak,
Yeah.
or the community center is not operating at its peak. So the question I think the board has is, do you add an additional 38 parking spaces for the pool, giving the limited use of it during the season, times it's used, the fact that all these uses aren't overlapping. So I think the number, if you're asking me, it's either 97 or at max 113, which would take you to,
That's 75 plus 38?
yeah. Would take you to 113, which would take care of the daycare, would take care of the recreational facility membership or community center membership, and also would give you extra parking spaces for the swim team, the swim meets, if all these things happen at once.
So then let me ask you a question, and I apologize, but yeah, obviously, parking and its impact is one of the big issues here. So I just want to make sure I understand, that I get it right. So if it's 75 and 38, right? 75 for the membership, 38, 4 months a year for the swim meet. Why do you not add the 22 to the 113?
Because the peak times of when they happen are different, right? Because the swim team is going to be in the afternoon, 3 to 5, where the peak time of the daycare is in the morning, from 8 to 9:30.
Well, that's just,
So they're gonna spend the night?
no, that's just a pickup and drop off.
That's correct.
That's not the usage. I mean, it's people, the employees are going to be there.
Correct. The testimony's been the peak time for the daycare is in the morning. We're going to assign the 22 spaces for the daycare, right? Conceivably, a lot of those spaces can be utilized for the swim team.
No, those
later.
22 spaces are the employees.
But that's the way it's calculated, yes. It's calculated by employee.
But they're gonna be,
They're going to be there all day.
But the recreational center itself, in that number, you would assume there's also an employee count as well.
can you tell us we could?
I have a question. The community center, if you didn't have the swimming pool, what would be the next, the occupants in the next largest place of assembly?
It would be the sanctuary.
How many people can you fit?
It wouldn't go by, well, I guess it would. I looked at that, I think it was like somewhere around 22, 24.
People?
24 spaces.
It's broken, I don't know, it's broken down, it's not that they're not.
It's about a square foot, 22 spaces for the sanctuary.
No, if you didn't count it as a house of worship, if that's an accessory to the community center, and the community center has one space for every 4 allowable occupancy in the largest place of assembly. So if you don't count it as a house of worship, you just, what's the maximum occupancy of the room?
I'm not sure of that.
Yeah, I can count.
We did, the pool in the application.
Okay. We don't have time to go any further.
Mr. Chairman, this should take 2 seconds, but our architect does just to reintroduce the new plan, because we made one change. We honestly can do the direct in 5 minutes.
There's no time for questions. I mean,
He's gonna have to come back.
yeah, we're gonna have to come back, because I've been told we have to close.
At 10:30?
10:30.
I promise you this.
We need a date,
Yeah, let's get into the date, so I'm gonna carry this to March.
March 5th is not,
We'll put you on, with no guarantee that you get hurt. What's gonna have to happen is, this is the regular meeting. Mark Mateo is gonna handle the first half. I'm handling the Walton application that was heard after your application 2 weeks ago, they'll probably go first on March 5th at the end, and then you guys, without guarantee, can get hurt, but we can put you on.
Ward 2 has only 2 applications, 2 full.
Which one?
Ward 2.
I am authorized to carry the application in March, to the March meeting.
Okay.
I'm not authorized to carry it, sir.
We'll put you on, but we're not sure that we can hear you.
Understood.
I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand that the board has other matters on it. The board has heard this application now. We've had 5.5 hours in the last 2 weeks. So we'll put you on, but we can't guarantee we're gonna make the amount of progress at the next meeting that we have this week.
We're going to be requested to be heard, honestly, so.
I understand.
And I understand what you're saying, I think we understand.
Will we have a transcript for the members not here?
Of course. I have my architect who's going to testify to elevation.
Right. Yes, the architect hasn't been the subject of question by anybody.
Well, yes, he was actually. I looked at the transcript. He was open to the people who are not represented.
Was he?
Right. Yeah.
It's not listed it's not listed on the cover sheet of the transcript.
No, but
Okay.
I went through there.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually open to.
So I know that Dr. Powers said that he hadn't been able to ask questions of that witness. So we'll have to work that out.
Okay.
And then your plan, that's.
And then I have the plans.
That's it.
That's it.
And then we have to have the decision, we have to talk about, you've made a legal argument that the residents' appeal should not be heard because it's untimely. We're going to need to address that. And I don't know if one of the residents wants to speak to it in lieu of his price, but we should have someone vote if they want to.
If they want to.
Right.
Okay, so may I, very quickly, thank you.
As long as you take the limited amount of time you're staying.
Thank you. Good evening.
For the record, state your name.
Yes.
Nasser Abukar, Nassir.
Please be quiet because we cannot hear anything he's saying.
Last name is Almukkhtar.
Got you sworn in at the prior hearing?
Yes.
And you're a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey?
Yes.
So we submitted revised architectural drawings to the board in advance of this meeting, is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you please note the last revision date on this plan?
February 7, 2020.
We're going to mark this as 810. 810. I'll mark it collectively as 810, and this is consisting of how many sheets?
3.
Okay. So could you just, for the board and the public, can you just explain the change in this plan from the last time you testified?
Sure, so there's not much, I'll make it really quick. There was Commissioner Veteran, he raised the question of, having windows on the easterly side, which would be facing the residential portion. And there was concern about noise and privacy, so we eliminated those windows on that side and blocked. There are no more any windows there. There will be windows on the north, facing the north, and facing the south, facing Oakdene basically.
And you have an elevation view of that?
Yes, so if we turn to the last page.
Back up a little bit so they can't see anything.
So the east elevation, in lieu of the windows, we add some decorative patterns to it. There will be some, half columns and some stucco surfaces with reveals, so that it wouldn't be just a solid surface throughout. It will be, to lighten the look of it. This will decrease the daylight to the swimming pool, but we can add, artificial lighting into the interior space to make up for that lost daylight.
Okay. Will this, in your opinion, increase the privacy to the neighbor?
Definitely, sound and privacy, visual.
Were there any other changes to the architectural drawing?
Nothing major. I labeled the elevations, also the facades, because we labeled them as north, east, to make it more clear.
Okay. Any substantive changes other than the removal?
No, that's it. Just relocate some door to enhance the access to the swimming pool. That's about it.
If you substituted the wall for like glass block, would it do the same thing? If you substituted the material for glass block, it would almost do the same thing. You could get lighting, but it would kill the sound and everything else.
We can do that, but the glass block has less, sound transmission.
I get that, but a lot less than a single piece, than an insulated piece of glass.
Correct, yeah. But this will have total insulation, pads insulation for sound.
But if you
so-
wanted to get light into it,
Sure.
glass block would be the next best substitute. Right, because you can
That's
just take
true.
the top.
We can also do some skylights, so while designing the HVAC equipment, maybe we can do some skylights.
Or do them high up on the top of the building where it wouldn't be a privacy issue for everybody. I'm trying to get your light into your building with.
Yeah, but we're concerned about the noise also factor. We don't want to have any chance with that, so we want to satisfy that.
Just those, once again, just those 7 days out of the year, there'll be a meet there. But, we'll take it every step we can.
Anything else, Dave?
That's it.
He's gonna come back for questions.
Correct. Unless you want to.
We have gone 5 minutes past closing time of the building, so thank you for that extra 2 minutes.
Thank you.
At the chair's discretion, I need to suspend good welfare tonight, so thank you all, and good night.
Hold on.
Motion to carry.
Hold on. Where are we on the 5th?
Oh, good question.
What, are we in this room?
Right here.
Okay, so members of the public, if you're here on the application of AUCC for 50 Oakdene, this matter is being carried without further notice to March 5th, 7 o'clock, in these chambers, Richard Road, Center 250 Colonial Court. No further notice is going to be provided. I want to caution the public, I don't know when this matter is going to be going on. It'll be towards the end of the meeting. We don't know how much time will be devoted to it. Mr. Farrar, you extend the time for the board to act until March 5th?
From March 5th to
Yeah, thank you.
Motion to carry.
Without objection,